a co-founder and CEO at the Visual Storytelling Institute here in sunny Miami, Florida. And that's why I'm super excited to have on our show today Susan Emerick. She is one of the early pioneering influencer, one of the early pioneers of starting this movement called today influencer marketing. She launched some really notable influencer marketing programs at IBM, and she's an educator, speaker, and author of the book, The Most Powerful Brand on Earth: How to Transform Teams, Empower Employees, Integrate Partners, and Mobilize Customers to Beat the Competition in Digital and Social Media. Wow, this is really a mouthful. So welcome to the show, Susan. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you, Shlomi. It's an honor to be here, and so great to reconnect with colleagues that it's been a while since we worked together, but awesome to be here.
Yeah. And just for the folks listening and watching this, both myself and Susan, we overlapped for a period of time while working at IBM. So in some cases, I had the privilege to actually work with Susan directly and really see the tremendous influencer marketing program she developed. So definitely a great opportunity for you guys today to hear it from the source. So before we get started, maybe if you can paint a picture to our audience and really talk a little bit about how you got started in influencer marketing. What was your backstory?
Sure. Happy to share that. Well, I've been so incredibly fortunate to have the opportunity to become, as you said in the intro, an early pioneer in digital and social networking, primarily for business. And because IBM is a business-to-business company for the most part, we entered into influencer marketing back in 2007 or even before that, right around that time, and working with a core team in IBM's social insights practice. Although it wasn't called that at the time, it was market insights. And since that time, we started with a very early pilot, and we were challenged with the question of what could be known from social listening. And so with that challenge, we took forward plotting a course for defining and instrumenting a social listening competency center. And it was from that initial pilot that we really delved into what does it take to harness intelligence from the social web and uncover individuals who are prominent and influential. And what is it going to take to bring that kind of intelligence to the organization? And it was through that early pilot that we had the opportunity to work with IBM Research and build what is now known as Watson capabilities. But in the early days, it was to instrument an influencer intelligence system that really tapped into Watson's machine learning and natural language processing, and now what is known today as artificial intelligence, to really understand what was being said in the social web, who was saying it, and who was prominent in terms of expressing their views and influential in terms of thought leadership. So this competency now is a social insights practice for IBM that's expanded across the globe. And we use it to consistently and always keep an ear to the ground, but apply insights from social intelligence to inform our marketing planning, our engagement strategies, our community engagement development, and also our influencer relation programs. So that's how I got started in my backstory.
Wow, that's fascinating. So it sounds like your original background was really marketing and communications, but you really align it with the times, with the emergence of social media, and you start developing the practice. Now, those early programs you're talking about, were they specifically focusing on influencers from inside the organization or also external influencers?
It's really interesting that you asked that question, because actually what tipped off the work stream was the fact that marketing communications that we were doing digitally, primarily paid search and organic search, was really, and the traffic to our websites and everything was really starting to show referral traffic from social networks, from different discussions that were happening. And so it was that change in the way we needed to look at our web presence and integrating social and creating a presence not only within social branded channels, but also, more importantly, individuals that had a competency or subject matter expertise in a particular technology and help them to build their influence. And quite interestingly, how this came about way back then was from the ecosystem evaluation and social listening that we were doing. We started to see some influential employees emerge. And they were technical leaders in their domain expertise. And it was from that that we had the notion of, boy, if we could really find out what do these individuals need in terms of support to help them become even more prominent and more influential, wouldn't it be interesting to build a practice around that and make a repeatable methodology? So that's sort of the way it evolved. Was initially, being pressured on our digital strategy and how we needed to incorporate social, considering the emergence of social networking and social media, take advantage of that, but also most importantly, help employees and partners in particular that had a particular technical expertise become prominent and accessible to be able to become influential in their domain expertise.
Wow, so that's fascinating. So if I understand what you're saying, it's really about first, it was the initial initiative to shape and optimize the branded social channels that you have. But then as you started doing more social listening and you start to identify internal influencer within the organization, the demand become that really how can we help them become better in what they do and create programs around them. And that's what's really started that influencer program. I remember at the time we called them SMEs, subject matter experts. Mm-hmm. I don't know if the term is still valid, but
yeah. Well, I think it's really an interesting evolution, because truly the heart of influencer marketing and the form of that marketing goes to very specific topical areas in which individuals, or the types of individuals in which are in a community around that topic, a shared topic of interest,
right,
can bring value to an audience or a market as a whole. And so when you think about that, identifying those individuals that possess the opportunity, if you will, and really are willing to put in what it takes to become influential, because it's not for everyone. Not everyone is cut out for that. But if they are really willing to put in the time to focus on driving their, if you will, personal brand, to bring value to a community around that topic, that to me is the heart of the influence. And I know that it's evolved quite a bit over the years. What I found is fascinating is the pendulum swinging back to what now the industry is calling micro-influencers. But that's exactly where we started, which is think about your goals for your company, orient around the topics that resonate around those goals, and be very specific around who can drive that agenda, who are the right people in order to bring that value to the community and influence potential buyers around that, and really building out a support system in order for them to be successful.
Yeah, so that's exactly, sounds to me like we're a good example of where the medium, those influencers become the message, and you build like programs around them, and it becomes all machinery that really not only help those initial influencers, but actually help identify and recruit others, new ones. But before we go deeper, now that we got a little bit about information about your background, maybe just for the sake of those people who kind of hearing about the term for the first time, or heard it but not sure what it really means. So when we talk about influencer marketing, what is your definition for this discipline? And if you can also unpack, the different types of influencers that you see in the industry today.
Sure, absolutely. And I was fortunate enough to be a part of the Word of Mouth Marketing Association Research and Measurement Council when we actually wrote the WOMA Influencer Handbook. Mm-hmm. It was way back in like 2013 or something like that. So
yeah, I remember I read it.
Yeah, cross-brand group of individuals who really put their heads together on helping define it for the marketplace. I still think it resonates quite a bit, but I would say my personal definition of influencer marketing is truly a form of marketing which focus is placed on specific individuals or a type of individuals that share a topic of interest in common and can really bring value to a market as a whole. And so by identifying individuals that can drive influence, whether it's because of their academic focus, or if it's, like I said, their subject matter expertise, or even if it's just a cause or passion that they have, the point is that these programs orient marketing activities around these individuals and bring that support system to them. And so you start to think about, well, what does success look like? And when you put how you're going to measure whether or not you've made a difference at the beginning of your goal setting, you start to think about the importance of prioritizing particular types of individuals and their prominence or understanding around the topic that's contextual in which your program is intended to drive change. So when you think about that measurement aspect and putting the beginning with the end in mind, like Stephen Covey says, think about how will you measure success. And it's really, are these individuals that I'm thinking about able to reach and really have the quality of reach in their network that's significant enough to drive that agenda, that topical alignment to my business goals? Do they have the ability to drive engagement, and are they well connected in the sense of they're highly committed and engaged to building a network? So they possess those characteristics, that they are a natural community leader, or well connected within, in technology, for example, user groups are particularly important. Another point around engagement and connectivity happens to be their contributions. And we say, sure, there's a lot of activity that can happen, but we're not looking for activity. We're actually looking for content that is truly leading edge, if you will, and they are able to contribute in a valuable and sustainable way in order to drive more engagement, more connectivity, and ultimately be highly responsive in that engagement. So that's of particular importance. And I already kind of mentioned the subject matter expertise, and I think about it as authority and really understanding and bringing knowledge to a community in a valuable way, and being dedicated to that focus area, and being able to advance the community's understanding of a particular topic, or engendering, really inspiring engagement if it's around a cause or whatever it might be.
So it sounds like really what you're saying is that, the criteria for selecting them is it's not enough that you are active all the time. You need to be an authoritative voice with valuable content. And so it's a combination of value and also being active and engaging your audience. Now, do you see any difference in terms of what we call employee advocacy programs, where the influencers is coming from the inside the organization versus influencers that are pretty much what I called earlier prosumers, those mega influencers that are on the consumer land, so to speak? And I know that there's some terminology that's been running around between a micro and macro influencer. Those macro are like the celebrity type. So maybe you can make an order within all these types.
Yeah, I think it really depends on the brand, the product and or service in which the program is intended to support. And you need to evaluate that from that lens. And in some instances, a celebrity would be, fitting for that. But again, I think it is a matter of evaluating and having that system in which to evaluate and really prioritize who's going to drive the reach, the quality of reach you're intending to achieve, who has the authority or really the, how do I say, the personality, if you will, that's going to be fitting for that particular goal for your business, and really the commitment to being connected and truly engaged. So I think with that in mind, I think that recipe, if you will, can be applied no matter if you're a B2B or a B2C environment. And quite frankly, I think those lines are kind of flattening more and more the more we're connected socially across the social web. But again, I think you have to go back to the topic of interest. The topic of interest is going to be the center of gravity.
Right.
And that's going to be different if you're talking about, a highly technical orientation around a topic of artificial intelligence compared to something that is more, a personal brand like makeup, for example. I mean, the topic of interest is the center of gravity. And I think that's a really good, a good thing to think about.
Absolutely. And since this is a visual storytelling today show, we are really interested in understanding, the intersection with the visual storytelling. Now, do you see this emerging type of influencers? I call them visual influencers, just because they tend to specialize in a visual social network like Instagram or YouTube.
Right. Well, definitely, I just think the social web in general, and I think it reflects the human consumption habits, is moving to visual. So whether that's video or imagery, etc., you start to see massive growth and predictive massive growth in visual forms of media consumption habits. Right. And so that reflects pretty naturally in terms of visual influencers, whether they're on Instagram or YouTube or what have you. I see a lot of brands doing that really well. I also think that it's always fascinating to see what my students at West Virginia University bring back when we have our particular lesson on visual engagement and which brands really do that well. A couple of them that always come up on top seems to be brands like REI, because they do a lot of outdoor user-generated content from consumers using their backpacking and they're in beautiful scenery. And another one is a great example is GoPro. That's been always seems to come back. Starbucks, of course, is another one where you're, in a community of people enjoying Starbucks. But I've been selfishly kind of have an incubator in a way of watching my daughters grow up and see how they consume visual social media and how they participate. And I found it really, really interesting to watch the emerging category of beauty and
lifestyle,
makeup applications. And it's just this whole movement is mainly around YouTube and Instagram where, young women from around the world are videotaping beauty applications. So they want to show a makeup tutorial on how to look like Kim Kardashian's makeup today.
Right.
They show you how to get that look. So it's been really, really interesting to watch that exploding space, if you will, of these self-made makeup artists sharing their techniques and the products that they're using. And of course, I'm sure behind the scenes, there's
some brands
that are supporting, supporting that product trial and development. But it's just really boomed over the last 10 years to see where it is now. And that's just an example.
Yeah, no, for sure. So hopefully, some of the ears of our listeners have perked up by now, and they definitely started to think about influencer marketing more seriously. So for those who'd like to kind of dip their toes in the water and get started, so what would you say would be like a typical business objective that an influencer program or visual influencers for that matters can serve? If you can go ahead.
I think, I kind of already said it in the beginning or as we were talking, but first and foremost, focusing on the topic at hand and the category in which your topic is relevant. So thinking about, if you have a need to establish your brand in a particular category, if you're an up-and-coming brand that needs to get discovered, thinking about that relevance of the topic at hand in the category and combining that with the relationships that would bring that to life.
So for example, is it something like when you say the topic could be about driving awareness? So obviously you want to match it to the discover stage in the buyer's journey. This is really a set or series of topics that all talking about people is going to hear it for the first time, right? So how
absolutely.
Yeah.
So you would want to start with research to identify, well, first of all, understanding the dialogue and the context in which that is being discussed.
Yeah.
What is the natural language of the conversation at hand? How are people in this particular category talking about something? And then how do you position your brand in that context? So identifying not only the spoken language, how it's discussed, but also who's engaged, who are the individuals,
right? And
how do you enter into that ecosystem in order to drive influence for a particular product or service? It takes really careful planning, but I would say research is fundamental. There's a lot of tools out there now that if you don't, have a big team at your disposal, you can still do quite a bit of intelligence gathering. So, market research is certainly more accessible from gathering social intelligence today than it was, say, 10 years ago when I started this.
Yep.
But also really careful planning and thinking about this as a true differentiator in a marketing mix. Mm-hmm. Although it may not be familiar territory, apply those same marketing planning fundamentals to the way that you would any other discipline. So you want to be conscious of your target audience, which mediums or social networks are important to them. Where do you want to prioritize your engagement? Because you need to be focused and in particular determine, okay, from those channels that I'm going to prioritize, what content creation type do I need to focus on? And what are my distribution methods going to be within that channel of choice? So I think everything from the research to the planning, the careful planning and training that goes into it are fundamental in how to get started.
Now, do you see it as an exercise? Obviously, you said research, so I assume this is where you do your social listening and understanding what the market feels about a specific topic. But as you start recruiting influencers, is it an exercise of really matching topics that emerge from your social listening to specific influencers that specialize them? And the end result is really like influencers that are categorized by different stages of the buyer's journey, or one influencer can cover the entire journey?
I think it depends on the individual. And there's a couple things I map out in my book. One is being the 1-9-90 rule of the internet, where 1% are going to be the highly engaged community leadership, thought leadership kind of individuals. That's only 1%. Right. The 9% will be those that emulate and want to aspire to become that 1%. The 90% is everybody else. And so when you think about designing a program like this, you have to get real practical on who's that 1% in order to, really focus your investment and the outcome of your investment. The other thing is that there is a whole approach, a tiered system that I share in my book on how to build such a categorized tiered system using that rule and how to then think about the whole support system that you need to provide. And so when you think about it, you're going to have a portfolio of influencers. They're likely going to be a mix of employees, partner affiliates, distribution affiliates, etc. But you'll also have those individuals who are not necessarily affiliated to the brand, but just highly engaged because they share the passion around that topic and could be prominent influencers from that standpoint. So I would say, shameless plug for the book, but we cover that in 3 of the chapters around the tiered system, the model you need to create around that, but then also the portfolio of influencers, because influencer marketing is complicated and you need to be really thinking about what does that portfolio look like and who are the right individuals to put in that tiered system.
I see. No, definitely. Earlier, you touched briefly about the general process for someone that want to start an influencer marketing program.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, can you just maybe reiterate the steps? You said research, planning, maybe give us like the end-to-end process.
Sure. And this is, it's evolved over the years, but it also needs to be considered
Mm-hmm.
within the realm of the team that's putting it together. But research, planning, engagement, measurement is a continuous cycle that we developed so many years ago, and it's still
Yep, I
so
remember
true
it.
today. So true today, because what you do is you learn along the way. So as you're continually doing that research and you're executing the planning that you create, the programs that you created during that planning, when you start to evaluate and see the engagement happening, that's where you have optimization opportunities, where you can see this is working better than that's working. And so that continuous engagement monitoring, what content consumption is working better, in what forms, by who. So monitoring that full spectrum of engagement and that continuous evaluation of looking at what's working and what's not working. And then also having a measurement framework that helps guide. So measuring effectiveness, it's based on all of those stages, from the quality of reach to the engagement, and then ultimately the conversions that you're starting to be able to track back to your buying cycle. Ultimately, it's an end-to-end measurement framework that needs to be established. And there's a lot of work that's out there now, and proven methods that are out there that look at measurement from all aspects of paid, owned, earned, and shared. So there's just a lot of thought leadership out there. If teams don't have access to it, they can find best practices that have been proven and written about now.
I see.
Pretty readily accessible now. But those would be the four, I would say.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. One of the things that I've seen, at least in the literature and in some of the case studies, is that some marketers finding a little bit challenging to find the right balance between giving the influencers, free reign to communicate their content, their own styles, to keep their authenticity high. But at the same time, obviously, since a brand is behind them, how you can balance brand versus influencer original content?
Yeah, so going back to the selection process that I mentioned, if influencers are going to become an extension of your brand and your brand presence, it's critical that you put rigor around that evaluation process before you recruit and get them onboarded into your program. Right. And I would suggest, that's part of the research aspect of this. Choose wisely, because these relationships are going to be critical to your program and how the success of the way that your brand is reflected.
Absolutely.
So doing that, necessary evaluation up front for the individuals. Are they aligned to your brand's mission? Do they fit within your culture? Do they have a high degree of confidence in that topic that I have been kind of underpinning all along, is aligned to your product and service? And do they possess the ability to drive influence because of that high degree of competence around that particular topic of interest?
So that's a very important point. You said basically really you got to do the qualification at the onset versus finding later that there is some discrepancies or expectations are not really as you plan it for. But how do you really reach that holy grail of agreement on messaging? Is this part of the messaging requirements that you set, or guidelines for the influencer?
Yeah, so I think that that's all part of the planning, and is an important point of the training, and really being clear, providing clarity around
The
the
do's and don'ts.
narrative, the messaging, the
Yeah.
do's and don'ts. They want guardrails. No matter if it is an independent third party or if it's an employee or a partner, it doesn't matter. They have the intention to do the best on behalf of, being a part of something like that.
Right.
And they want to know the rules for engagement, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And so kind of having that thought out in advance and having clear support and training for that is essential. Because if you don't have those fundamental rules of engagement and kind of a governance model around it, then you don't have any recourse whatsoever. Not to say it should be punitive in any way, but the point is that ultimately you're onboarding these individuals because they have proven to have alignment to the and passion around the topic or the cause, and you want to make sure that they're successful. So ultimately, those that planning and that messaging and really like the rules of the road, as I mentioned, need to be conveyed up front, very clear and transparent, and so that you don't run into questions down the road or I didn't understand. So that just is an ounce of prevention.
No,
is worth the pound of cure, so they say.
no, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I can definitely appreciate, about having a clear criteria from the get-go, really get you to select the right people to work with. Since you've been active in this space for quite a long period, what would you say are really the most common misconceptions about influencer marketing that people tend to fall into, and maybe you can give them like a heads up with your expertise?
Yeah, well, I think it's really interesting to have been a part of this movement for as long as I have been, and watching, as I mentioned, the pendulum shift. So I think we went through a craze of influencers were all celebrities, and that's simply just not the case. And the fact of the matter is, we're seeing, as I mentioned earlier in our conversation, that this term of micro-influencer is now emerging and beginning to take hold within this industry. And what I find interesting about that is micro-influencers, especially in my work, has always been what's driving the most effective engagement. And it's particularly important in niche categories. And again, going back to that topic of relevance and making sure that you're focused on that is essential and foundational. I just read a study actually this morning that was published by the World Federation of Advertisers, and it had some really notable statistics in it that kind of helps the audience really get around this, which is 65% of multinational brands surveyed in the study plan to increase their influencer marketing spend over the next 12 months, but 86% of them report the goal of improved brand awareness. So 74% of those marketers plan to use influence to reach targeted and new audiences. But it's also really fascinating to see that of that 69% will use them in an advocacy program, a brand advocacy program. So the book that Chris and I wrote was really to put advocacy in the realm of advocacy can be driven by individuals, by brand affiliates or partners, or even by your customers. So when you think about that network of influence, You should think about that portfolio of influence on who can drive that advocacy, and it certainly could be a mix of any one of those.
So
but the other thing that's
basically, most of them are really at the top of the funnel, really focusing on awareness, but some of them are really in the advocacy level, which is like the last stage of the buyer's journey. Yeah.
Yeah, well, what's really interesting is that what they're starting to realize is the quality of connections in their network is critical. And in that study, it cited that 96% of the brands are identifying quality of followers as an important criteria. Well, that's probably given rise based on the number of issues we've seen with fake followers and all of the the trending around, just building the numbers of your followers. Well, when you get underneath the hood, you better be looking at the quality of reach. And so that kind of goes back to what I said in the beginning, is the quality of the individuals in which you're building into your program, and being very transparent around the credibility and reputation these individuals have. Because I think it's high time that it's gotten that kind of attention and rigor, because in the early days, I think it was all about the numbers and trying to get as many possible followers as you could. Well, when you really start to think about it and get underneath it, it's more about what is the intention, what is the topic, is it truly followers that care about that topic? So really think about the relationship with those influencers and the importance of that relevance.
Yeah, so definitely the most typical misconception, it sounds like, is really don't fall for the numbers or the followers volume. That's not a measurement of an influencer capabilities.
Again, I think, it depends on the brand, and it depends on the product and service.
Right.
But certainly you want to make sure that you're looking at credibility and quality, because in the end, like we said, it's a reflection of your brand, and you want to make sure you're very careful about those choices.
Right. And you mentioned earlier a few good industry examples of brands that do it right. Obviously, IBM is definitely, up high there, but you mentioned GoPro, REI. Do you see others that are doing it really in a great way?
Well, I mentioned that beauty category that I've been following for a while, and there's self-made influencers. There's a woman, her name is Huda, and she's really become a self-made influencer, where at the same time, a celebrity influencer in that space is Rihanna. They both launched campaigns, and now even self-titled makeup brands as an extension of their personality. Very different individuals, but nonetheless, pretty much the ability to drive high engagement and in a particular category that has then extended into creating their own product makeup line through their commitment to that. So one wasn't Huda certainly wasn't a celebrity, where Rihanna certainly is. But you can just see, if you just look at those two juxtaposed examples, that it's possible, whether you're an individual that has a passion or whether or not you're a celebrity that has a particular area of interest.
Absolutely. So just to wrap up our conversation, maybe it would be good if you can give our audience your top 3 tips for starting an influencer marketing program.
Oh, yeah. Well, certainly the first one I have to say, and we didn't really talk about this, but compliance is critical. Understand the guidelines.
Right.
The FTC, SEC guidelines, critical. So make sure you're well schooled on those.
Mm-hmm.
Also make sure that you're setting objectives relative to your business goals. And the third one is make sure that you have meaningful targets and measurement frameworks established for what does success look like.
Mm-hmm.
That should govern your planning, your optimization that needs to happen along the way. And then it also helps you to quantify and explain to your stakeholders that are giving you investment how this program's working. You're going to need that.
No, for sure.
Gone are the days of qualitative, gut type of measurements. It's no more fuzzy.
Yeah.
They want quantitative proof, and now we have the tools in order to deliver that. So I would say those would be my top three.
Wonderful. All right. So Susan, I really want to thank you so much for a great time delving into the world of influencer marketing programs. And for those of our folks in our audience that would like to contact you, how can they do that?
Sure. They can reach me at SF Emerick on Twitter, or they can reach me through my blog, susanemerick.com. There's an about page there as well, all kinds of ways to contact me. So again, Shlomi, thank you so much for having me. It's been genuine pleasure to reconnect and have this conversation.
Yeah.
And certainly honored to be a part of your podcast.
Wonderful. Thank you so much again.